The air was thick with powder. The ground trembled beneath the weight of cannon fire. And among the defenders of Vicksburg, bloodied, exhausted, and resolute, stood men from the Lone Star State. From the brutal clash at Raymond to the desperate hand-to-hand combat at the Railroad Redoubt, 2nd Texas Lunette, and Milliken's Bend, Texans carved their names into the red clay of Mississippi. This is the story of courage, sacrifice, and a siege that changed the war. This is the story of Texans at Vicksburg. The Mississippi River was the spine of the Confederacy, and Vicksburg, perched atop its bluffs, was the fortress that controlled it. For months, General Ulysses S. Grant attempted to strike Vicksburg from the north, but his efforts to flood the city, dig canals, and flank it by swamp came to nothing. In April 1863, Grant gambled everything. With support from Admiral Porter's fleet, he crossed the Mississippi River south of the city. After victory at Port Gibson, he turned his army east toward Jackson, and then west again to trap Vicksburg from behind.
This quiet field outside of Raymond, Mississippi was anything but quiet on May the 12th, 1863. It was here that Colonel Hiram Granberry and the reformed 7th Texas Infantry struck what they thought was a Union brigade. What they faced instead was nearly 20,000 men under General John McPherson. Outnumbered and outflanked, the Texans fought with fury and then fell back under orders, preserving themselves to fight again.
After Chickasaw Bayou, Confederate Brigadier General John Gregg moved his brigade east to Jackson. Reinforcements soon arrived. The reconstituted 7th Texas Infantry, now under the command of Colonel Hiram Granberry. After Grant's victory at Port Gibson, General John A. McPherson's 17th Corps, 20,000 strong, advanced on Raymond. Grant intended to sweep east before turning back west to crush Vicksburg. General John C. Pemberton, who was in charge of all of the Confederate forces defending Vicksburg and the Mississippi, ordered Gregg to intercept McPherson. Lacking cavalry for reconnaissance, Gregg underestimated the size of the Union force, believing it only a brigade. Gregg led the 7th Texas and 3rd Tennessee into battle. They hit the 20th and 68th Ohio with fury, driving them back. But McPherson reinforced his lines. Gregg realized the truth. He was badly outnumbered. With skill and discipline, he pulled his brigade back, saving it for another day. Gregg would fight again at the First Battle of Jackson, and later as part of Joseph Johnston's Army of Relief. On May 18, Grant reached Vicksburg. Pemberton dug in. Before laying siege, Grant launched two massive assaults, May 19th and May 22nd. In these brutal attacks, 2 points would become forever linked with Texas valor: the Railroad Redoubt and the 2nd Texas Lunette.
This is the Texas Monument at the Vicksburg National Battlefield, roughly the location of the Railroad Redoubt, defended by Waul's Texas Legion. What happened here on May the 22nd would become a legend among Texans.
Union forces breached this redoubt, gaining a foothold inside Confederate lines. 2 Alabama regiments failed to dislodge them. General Stephen Dill Lee turned to Waul's Legion. Ordered to retake the redoubt at all costs, 40 volunteers from the Legion launched a counterattack using hand grenades. They recaptured the fort and took 50 Union prisoners.
We gave them back their thunder tenfold. The redoubt was ours again.
The rest of Waul's Legion held the line to the right, repelling attacks by the 11th Wisconsin and 97th Illinois. By nightfall, Union forces had been driven back. After May 22nd, Grant abandoned assaults. He began siege operations. Vicksburg would be starved into submission.
Behind me is the site of the 2nd Texas Lunette, a crescent-shaped earthwork defended by the men who gave it their name. Built to guard the Baldwin Ferry Road entrance to Vicksburg, this lunette was a key point in the Confederate line during the siege. Remarkably, while the war was still raging in 1864, the land where the lunette stood was deeded to a Jewish synagogue and ultimately became this Jewish cemetery. Today, few visitors realize they are walking on ground once soaked in blood and smoke, held by Texans who stood their ground to the bitter end. This is hallowed ground in more ways than one.
The 2nd Texas Infantry held this position through weeks of brutal siege and repulsed direct assaults on May 22nd. Union troops were driven back by musket, bayonet, and sharpshooters hidden behind the lunette's earthen shield.
The boys stood to the last man. Smoke choked the trench. The very dirt trembled from the weight of fire.
The lunette never fell. Its defenders held with grim determination, their lines piled with the fallen. While General Grant tightened his grip around Vicksburg from the east, Confederate forces west of the Mississippi launched a daring effort to sever his supply line. The plan came from General Richard Taylor, son of former President Zachary Taylor, and a rising Confederate commander in Louisiana. Taylor believed that striking Grant's rear might force him to lift the siege. His eyes were on Milliken's Bend, a key Union depot on the river north of Vicksburg. But Taylor didn't know Grant had already shifted his main supply line from the west side of the Mississippi to Haynes Bluff and Snyder's Bluff on the Yazoo River, well beyond Confederate reach. Left behind at Milliken's Bend were recently enlisted Union regiments of formerly enslaved African Americans. Poorly trained, barely equipped, and with little battlefield experience, these troops would soon face some of the hardest veterans in the Confederate Army. On the morning of June 7, 1863, Taylor's strike force, led by Brigadier General Henry McCulloch, launched the assault. His brigade included the 16th Texas Infantry, 17th Texas Infantry, 19th Texas Infantry, and the dismounted 16th Texas Cavalry. The Texans crossed the levees and surged into the Federal line. Fierce hand-to-hand combat broke out as the untested black troops struggled to reload their newly issued Austrian rifles. Many fought bravely, but Confederate pressure overwhelmed them, and many others bolted and ran. Just as the Texans prepared to break the Union line entirely, two ironclads, USS Choctaw and USS Carondelet, opened fire from the river. Their heavy guns raked the fields, forcing the Confederates back into the tree line. The Confederate attack failed to reclaim Milliken's Bend. Grant's real supply lines remained untouched, and the Western campaign continued undisturbed. But the battle left a permanent mark. For the black soldiers who fought there, Milliken's Bend became a crucible, proof that men who had once been enslaved could fight with courage and die with honor. For the Texans, it was a brutal encounter and a reminder that even victory on the battlefield can't undo strategic miscalculation. Vicksburg became a city of caves. Food dwindled to rats and mule meat. Texans in the trenches endured hunger, disease, and bombardment. Finally, on July 4th, with no other options, Pemberton surrendered Vicksburg. The Confederacy was split, but Texans had stood their ground with honor.
The courage of the Texans who fought in the Vicksburg campaign is not forgotten. Their names are etched in stone, and in a legacy of a war that tested them like no other. This was their stand. This was their valor. Lone Star warriors to the very end.